Good afternoon. I call the Thursday, April 27th, Carroll County Board of Commissioners work session to order at 4 p.m. Point of reference, Chairman Morgan is out of town representing Carroll County today at the Association of County Commissioners of Georgia, and she will be returning to conduct our meeting on Tuesday, May the 2nd. At this time, I will ask County Clerk Bingham for the roll call, please.
Vice Chairman Chance.
Here.
Commissioner McClendon. Commissioner Lee.
Here.
Commissioner Fuller.
Here.
Commissioner Reynolds.
Here.
Commissioner Bailey.
Here.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. At this time, our first order of business on the work session is to hear from our Finance Director, Ms. Searcy, with our monthly recap.
Good afternoon. You have before you the financials from March. At the end of March, we had shown a year-to-date revenue of $61,824,000. That's about 92% of our budget, so we're well on the way to making our projected revenue numbers. We showed our expenses at $51,024,000. That's 76.11% of our budget, and we're 3/4 of the way through the year, so we should have been at about 75%. We do have some capital expenditures that are showing in the expense lines that were approved last year, last fiscal year, and due to supply chain and other issues, we were not able to get those expended in last year, so we'll be doing a budget amendment at the end of the year that'll bring those items back into line. There were no expenditures for the SPLOST 15 SPLOST, but we did have expenditures for the 21 SPLOST. A majority of that was road supplies that we purchased for paving and gravel and those kind of items. We're well underway on the field at the rec department, the multi-purpose field that we're working on there, and we're in the design process for the county admin building, so we had some design fees there, and that's a majority of what our SPLOST expenses included.
Commissioners, you have any questions or comments for Ms. Searcy? I did want to point out a couple of things that we continue to look very healthy. I know on intergovernmental on revenues, that's down a little bit from prior year to date, but I know we're waiting on some reimbursements. Overall, we're at $3.28 million over prior year to date on revenue, so that looks good. We've already exceeded our realized budget by over $500,000 on the interest, and that's a number that we continue to be appreciative of some adjustments that we made there. So the report looks very good. Thank you, Ms. Searcy. Commissioners, you have before you the proposed agenda for Tuesday, May the 2nd. As usual, our approval of minutes, public comments, special presentations, and rezonings will all happen on Tuesday evening. So our first order of business under the business section is item 10.1, the Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act grant, and we will hear from Juvenile Court Judge Palmer at this time.
Thank you, Commissioner and Commissioners. This is a new grant opportunity we have applied for, and we have received preliminary approval for, subject to the Commission approving it. It will be a grant of approximately $200,000 per year, and the purpose of the grant will be to provide services to pregnant women who suffer from substance abuse issues, to provide them treatment. It would be incorporated into our Family Treatment Court program that we already have, that has been very successful. We have upcoming meetings planned and scheduled with Tanner Medical Center. I'm working on a meeting with the nursing manager of the Board of Health, and Ms. Story just told me she's got a meeting set up next week with the Pregnancy Resource Center. And the program, it's called Plans of Safe Care. It's been a thing that's been around for a while. Douglas County has a project. I'm actually talking to the judge in Douglas County tomorrow afternoon about their system. But the plan of safe care is the first thing is to identify women who are pregnant who may be suffering from substance abuse issues that would lead to obviously injuries to the child. And then many of the cases I have, children in foster care. And in fact, the number one fact scenario of a child who is in foster care in Carroll County and probably every county in the state of Georgia is that DFACS gets a referral on the day the child is born at the hospital Tanner Medical Center because a child has been born and the child has methamphetamines or opiates in the child's system, and that newborn baby is going through withdrawals. And it is the worst thing that I see. I mean, we have had children here in Carroll County in the neonatal unit who have been in there for a month and either is given opiates to wean them off of their addiction to the opiates. And so it has been something we've talked about for years trying to do, and this grant became available and we want to do it to identify the mothers at the outset, very early on, work with the OBGYNs, identify them, provide services to them, provide coverage, help them through the Pregnancy Resource Center about things they may need for the child. And then it would extend on after the child's born to ensure that they continue their treatment and that we make sure that they identify and get the services needed, including getting to the doctor on time and then taking to the doctor after it. One of the specific things that would be fully funded under this, and we're asking for you to approve, is we would be able to hire a case manager who would be solely assigned to identifying them, working with the mothers, keeping them on treatment, making sure that they not only do what we want them to do for their treatment, but that they get to their doctors and are taking care of their children both before birth and then for up to 18 months after birth. It'd be a 12-month program, but if they still continue to have problems, they could be moved into our family treatment court program, which is an 18-month program that's already being funded. So that's what we're asking you to approve. We're really excited about this opportunity for Carroll County.
Thank you for the presentation, Judge. As far as the grant goes, do you know if that's a reimbursable, that we would pay that out and then we receive it back like we do on the other
Yes, that's my
grants?
understanding. It would work like the other ones that the county would pay out. And I know we're changing the budget to put that as a separate thing, and then it would come out of that new grant budget. But yes, the county would put up front, and then we would get reimbursed. This grant, it's a little different. I mean, they're all a little different. This comes through the State Department of Human Services. We were told about this by our local DFACS office. So it comes through DHS, but it is federal money through CAPTA, which is the federal law for child abuse protection and treatment. So federal money coming to the state to us.
And as far as the additional position that this would encumber, is that something, and this may be a question for Ms. Searcy, I know some other grants that we have done that it was, I guess, understood in their hiring that if the grant went away, it was not guaranteed that the position would automatically stay, not that the Board of Commissioners couldn't consider to continue to fund it future, but is that something that would be involved in the hiring process with this grant?
Yes, this would be the same as that, and so the same provisions would be put into, it's in the advertisement and then the job description when they're hired and they sign off on that. Yes.
Okay. Commissioners, do you have any questions or comments for Judge Palmer?
Just a couple for my own
Yes, sir.
edification. And by the way, I mean, I know this is a problem internationally, and it is a sad situation. It's especially sad to me. I mean, with children and now with grandchildren, that we have these situations where the poor child is brought into these situations from the get-go. And as far as this grant, particularly, it's a multi-year grant, so.
Yes, and we're hoping, I mean, it's, renewable every year. And that is different I guess two things. It would be a one-year grant renewable every year, and so it's really based on our success in it. But one thing we like about this, a lot of times the grants we get that come from federal money would be a 3-year limit. So they're not renewable. After 3 years, it goes away. This is not. This is more like our current drug court grants that's renewable every year. And so we would hope, if we're successful at it, that it'll be a long term.
How, with this situation of pregnant mothers on such drugs and stuff, is that stabilized, or is the number going up? Is it going down? Probably not.
And this would just be anecdotal, just from my
Right.
experience looking at
Yeah.
it. The overall number we have of children who are coming into care has decreased. It's decreased in the last 5 years. It has probably stabilized in the last 2 or 3. And just to give you an overall number, we peaked out probably 2020 at and maybe 19. It was prior to. I'm looking back. I forget how long I've been doing this. Between 13 and probably 17 or 18, we in the entire state had an increase in the number of children coming into care. We peaked out in Carroll County at probably a little over around 240 children in foster care. That has decreased steadily since that time. We have approximately 150, I think it's 154 to be exact right now. And we have kept that steady through the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic. It went down before the pandemic, so it's not really a pandemic number. But so that's where we are. But it has not significantly decreased since then. The hope is that this will bring that number down. The last thing I was saying in answer to your questions, the most worrisome thing to me that I have seen is in my first 5 years I was in this position, and this will be my 10th year in November, or finished, is I was only seeing, especially in parents, the worst cases being methamphetamine. Now the worst cases are heroin, and so I do see children born that the parents are intravenous heroin users, and so the addiction to the children is that. And that is the worst that we see, the harm to the newborn children. The worst cases I've seen of children spending long-term in NICU units. And it's a horrible thing to say, and but that's the thing I've seen. It's not an increase, but a switch in the worst drugs. So the opioid epidemic, has hit us. And it's
Impact.
not only just, dealers and people you think in your mind, but it is young women too.
Well, I know we all appreciate what you do, and anything that can be done to improve and ameliorate the situation, the better. It just tears at my heart to see innocent kids brought into these situations. And I know, like, even with marijuana use, that it disadvantages the child, not just the first 6 months or a year, but for years. I've read information about even in their junior high years, they have much more anxiety and that kind of thing because of parents during pregnancy on those drugs. I can't imagine the impact that these harsher drugs would have on the
That's
poor
true,
kids.
whether it's alcohol use, fetal alcohol syndrome and all, marijuana use, and that's correct. So we're going to try and deal with, across the board issues.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Any further questions or comments for Judge Palmer?
Thank you, Judge, for what you do.
All right, well, thank y'all. Thank you for your support. Y'all have been incredibly supportive. Yes, sir.
Judge, I have a question
Yeah.
before you leave. I'm a retired special education teacher.
Yes.
So a great many of the students that I had, they were there because of fetal alcohol syndrome, drug and fetal alcohol syndrome. I guess this is a matter of curiosity. What these kids are, I hate to use the word tracking, but do they keep up with how are they doing when they get into school? And how are they progressing as it gets
If they
down the
do,
road?
I don't know about it. So I think what you were seeing as a teacher and what information you got is probably from specific studies of it. But no, I don't have information. I don't see that the children that I'm seeing in court, and many of them, and frankly most of them here, we work very hard with the parents and get the parents off and get them 18, 2 years sober and return the children into the home when they get jobs and homes and all like that. That's the point of all of this. But I think after that fact, I do not think there is overall studies as to then the performance of these children, whether it's a termination of adoption to adoptive homes or whether it's return to the parents. I don't think there's, except for specific studies that are done. I don't know of a tracking overall with the state for their performance. And I think it's something we should do, because I think if we did do that and found out the economic impact of this, we would be putting more resources into this type of thing to prevent it from ever happening.
Well, I know Commissioner McClendon can attest to this. There's a gap. I mean, these kids, like, especially if they showed up from another state or even another county, we knew nothing about the background. And a lot of times you just couldn't get it. So, but I think we need something in place so we can see, how are they doing down the road.
Well, I think, and getting kind of off of it, but I think this is something that would help you. I see where they're in foster care and they're moved because of a foster change to a new school system. And it is extremely difficult for the school system to get information as to their educational background. And it hasn't been like anything's been lost. It's just
difficult to get.
difficult to get, right? Nobody wants to be the one to do that. Yes.
Commissioners, after hearing the presentation, if there's no further questions, would you be amenable to adding this to the consent agenda for Tuesday night?
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Judge
y'all. I
Palmer.
appreciate your continued
Thank you,
support.
Judge Palmer.
Item 10.2 is referencing the FY24 budget advertisement. That is not an item that will need action, and Chairman Morgan will address that on Tuesday night's meeting. Moving on to item 10.3 is contract for appraisal services with GMAS, and I'll call on Chief Tax Appraiser, Mr. Sparks, to come forward, please.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to come before you today. Before you is a contract it's basically a renewal or a continuation of an existing contract between Carroll County and a company called GMAS. GMAS is an independent contractor that performs commercial and industrial valuations and have been doing that for the last 3 years for Carroll County. I'll give you a little bit of a briefing on the differences between the previous contract that was entered in July of 2020 and what the current contract shows. The price is the first thing I'll address. In the old contract, the first year price was $65,000. In the new contract, that price goes to $76,000 in year one. In the old contract, year two, price was $65,000. New contract, that goes to $76,000 year two. Year three, the old contract was $100,000. In year three, in the new contract, that number goes to $111,000. And the reason for that is because we've all met and realized that there are specialized types of property in commercial industrial fields that do not follow the exact same model. So we've asked some of those properties to be valued a little bit differently, or be used for, there's a little bit different model to be used. Another one of the differences is on a per diem charge. In the previous contract, there was a $750 per diem for any hearing, which may include Board of Equalization hearings or any type of hearing that may be involving an appeal. On the new contract, there is a $1,000 per diem, but it's only if the appeal goes to Superior Court. The third thing that I thought was very important in the old contract, the general liability insurance was $1 million per occurrence and $1 million aggregate. The new contract is $2 million per occurrence and $2 million aggregate. And on the automobile portion, which they provide their own transportation, under the old contract, it was $500,000 per occurrence and $1 million aggregate. And the new contract is $1 million per occurrence and $2 million aggregate. This contract that's being presented to you today was approved or recommended for approval by the Board of Assessors in the February 2023 Board of Assessor meeting. GMAS has agreed to the terms in this contract, and today I'm asking for your consideration for approval as well.
Mr. Sparks, it's my understanding in some conversations I've had with you that you have been pleased with the services that GMAS has provided you prior and in the prior contract, so you feel comfortable and confident moving forward with this one. Is that correct?
That is correct. I've had a working relationship with GMAS for the last 3 years here in Carroll County. Even had a working relationship in another county prior to that. I'm very satisfied with their work.
And obviously with the applicant pool, there's not as many people applying with this specialization in your office. I know in the future you would like to bring this back into house, but if we're looking at just monetary values, we're probably not that far off from the contract amounts, at least in year 1 and year 2, if we had them in-house, considering we would have on top of their salary, we would have benefit package as well that would drive that number up probably pretty close to what's being proposed in the contract. Is that a fair statement?
That is correct. I think it's a very financially feasible option at this time based on the employment situation.
Okay. Commissioners, do you have any questions or comments for Mr. Sparks?
I'd just like to say here, thank you for being transparent and always available and always ready and come to us with your discussions and topics. I like that openness and transparency, and also for the good customer service, especially in that you have reduced by significant amounts the number of cases going to BOE, both on the commercial and on the residential side. So thanks to that, and like our Commissioner Chance mentioned, the familiarity with this particular contractor and the good job they've done. I think it's a good thing to continue, especially given that it's impossible to find staff at this time to bring in, although we're trying. So thanks for trying.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the support of the commissioners, and I'd also like to extend a special thanks to County Attorney Stacey Blackman for the hard work that she's put into this as well.
And I just want to add also, I appreciate the time you spent with me the other day to make sure that I'm up to date, being the new guy on the board. I really appreciate what you do.
Thank you for coming by. I appreciate you, sir.
Commissioners, after hearing the presentation, would you be amenable to adding this to the consent agenda as well for Tuesday night?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Sparks.
Appreciate you.
Moving on to item 10.4, which is appointments for the Planning and Zoning Board. That's District 2, 4, and 6 that are up for reappointments. I will take the first one there, and I would like to reappoint my current representative, Mr. Jerry Dole. And we'll move to District 4. Mr. Fuller, would you like to propose someone?
Yes, I've talked to, on the Planning Zoning Board, Cassie Marshall currently holds that position, and Cassie and I have talked, and we're going to move her, but that will come up at a later date. And I'm going to propose that I want to appoint Jeffrey Vance to that position, and I gave all of you a short bio. Jeffrey currently serves on the Board of Elections, so I would like to move Jeffrey from the Board of Elections to Planning and Zoning.
Okay. Commissioner Bailey?
Yes, mine's going to be a reappointment of Jamie Beam. I've spoken with him, and he wishes to stay where he's at. Continue on.
Commissioners, after hearing the presentations on the floor of the nominations, are there any questions or objections? And if not, would you consider this to be a part of a consent agenda as well for Tuesday? Okay, thank you. Item 10.5 is the appointment of the Community Development Board of Appeals. Currently, there is a family sickness situation with my appointee, and so rather than trying to do half of this now and half of this on Tuesday, I would ask that this item would just be taken up at Tuesday night's meeting. That brings us to the end of the business section of the proposed agenda. For a recap, consent item number 1 is the current agenda item 10.1, Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act grant. Consent number 2 would be 10.3, currently on the agenda, the contract for appraisal services with GMAS. And then consent number 3 is currently 10.4 on the agenda, which is the appointments of the Planning and Zoning Board, with those appointments as listed. District 2, Jerry Doyle. District 4, Jeffrey Vance. District 6, Jamie Bean. After hearing the consent, I do want to ask again if we're okay with that as listed and if there's any objections. Hearing none, Madam Clerk, you've notated that for us. There's no further business here. Does the commissioners have any further questions or any further discussions they'd like to have based off of the proposed agenda for Tuesday? Okay. Ms. Blackman, is there anything additional? Okay. Madam Clerk, anything additional? Hearing none, I will call the work session